Hi, everybody. Ciao a tutti of the Friends of Italy Society of Hawaii. This is a new experience. So the level of induction into the world of wine that I'm associated with is going to be, let's ease into it and see how we evolve with the four wines that we have chosen for presentation tonight, with the four different regional food accompaniments as well. So, as I stated previously, I could take this in many different directions. There's so much knowledge, well, so much involved here that we can't really do justice in this amount of time. But I do always like to commence with what I call the Genesis story, which is really the geological formation of Italy, which not a lot of people realize. Italy is the youngest geological part of Europe. And why this is important is that wine grapes love soil. So geology is obviously going to be an important part of how wine grapes are elaborated in the environment. So why it's the youngest geological formation is it formed really as part of Africa. It was part of the supercontinent of Africa that split off as part of all the major rifts and subductions and tectonic movements of basically the African plate and the Adriatic plate. So this spun off over time. We're talking about sort of, this is really pre-Eocene, which is about 50 million years or so ago. And it spun off, and that's why Italy is a completely separate geological part of Europe. It's not part of the continent. It is this bizarre leg that sticks out in the middle of the Mediterranean. And why that's important, I think, to me, is it just shows the geological diversity, because obviously it's not just the rifts and subductions, the tectonic movement that's attested to by, the two only active volcanoes that still exist in Europe, but it's the diversity of soils, because we've also got glacial movements that happened after this time. We've got other metamorphic movements. It's always intriguing to me when you go to Italy that everything's covered in marble. It's the most exotically acquitted marble environment in the world. And that's a metamorphic rock that's very common. It's not as common anywhere else in Europe. So to me, geological diversity is a massive attribute for Italian wine. And we have this weird geological formation that it's this leg is different to the continent of Europe. So you're also going to get a lot of different elevations because of the geology, and you're also going to get a whole different array of climates. Most of the continent of Europe is governed by a continental climate with not as much maritime influence apart from those areas that abut the Mediterranean. The entire part of Italy is influenced really solidly and strongly by climatological factors from the Mediterranean, and not just the Mediterranean, but the Adriatic, and also even the African continent itself. So we have, I think, these two factors come into play. You also have the human culture that's contributed towards the cultivation of the vine, that creates these entirely unique cultural artifacts that cannot be replicated anywhere else on the face of the earth. And that is why, to me, Italian wine is so intriguing, because you do have this immense diversity. And I picked out four wines that I think encapsulate some of that diversity. They may not be some of the most exciting, rare varietals that we encounter, but I think these are absolutely essential exemplars of possibly some of the more renowned Italian wines that are currently on the market today. Dalla Terra itself really only deals with 100% estate, family-owned Italian wineries. These aren't wineries owned by large banks or insurance companies or corporate concerns. These are all grounded in the history and culture of their region, because they are elaborated by a particular family, unit who has roots in that area and stays, I think, very much abides by more traditional practices in that regard. So hopefully that geological background was somewhat intriguing. If we commence with the Marco FELLUGA Pinot Grigio from the Collio, and this is really one of the main parts of Italian wine as a business. One of the most intriguing and surprising statistics to me is that 70% of all Italian wine imported into the United States is Pinot Grigio. So if you're involved in the Italian wine business, you have to deal with Pinot Grigio in some respect. This is, I think, an exceptional example because we have a wine from a family-owned entity in a very tiny little commune of the Friuli area called Capriva. Capriva is probably the highest quality area of the Collio. It's right on the Slovenian border, and it has particularly high elevation here, and the soils are part of all this wifts and subductions that I was alluding to earlier. They call the soil ponca or fleisch. It was essentially part of the sea floor that subducted onto the surface. So we have essentially 100-million-year-old soils on something that was created in the Eocene period about 50 million years ago. Why this is interesting is because it's almost impervious to water, but it's very highly water retentive. So the vines find a really amazing place here. It has a particular capability for really amazing white wine production. Because of the elevation, it's influenced by the Julian Alps area and also the Adriatic Sea. So what I think we have here is a really high quality Pinot Grigio, perhaps some older vine age, about 30 to 40 years old, and that's been really quite traditionally vinified, but with no oak aging whatsoever. It's all stainless and all very fresh, very frisky. The acids are there, but there is a sort of chewiness to the Pinot Grigio fruit. It's definitely present in a lot more sapidità is the Italian expression, sapidity or minerality or saltiness, or just a real presence of something that underlies or gives that fruit that wonderful undertow. Accompanying food product is also essentially part of the territory. I don't know if you all managed to pick up on the actual prosciutto di San Daniele, which is worlds apart from the prosciutto we normally know, which is the prosciutto di Parma. Prosciutto di San Daniele is produced in just north of Udine, just very not far north from where this wine is produced, in the commune of San Daniele. Essentially, it's 13 square miles only, and there are only 31 companies who are allowed to make this particular prosciutto. And they have to source their pigs from around 4,000 pig farms in 10 region area of this part of Northeast Italy. So the prosciutto area, well, the area here, it's immersed in a really amazing hilly landscape. And it is known as an area that has all the factors just by a particular river that makes for the aging of prosciutto. For prosciutto crudo, it makes a sweeter, more sapid, wonderful expression of prosciutto. So hopefully that's something you're all enjoying with your tajut, which is Friulian for a glass of wine, Pinot Grigio. Both of these essentially Friulian products. Next, white we have is INAMA Soave. This, again, geology is playing an important part. in this wine. Soil geology, if nobody's mentioning these when they're discussing Italian wine, then I don't think you've got the proper means of expression here, because it's an essential part of the background. The background here is basalt soil, volcanic soil. The area of Soave is an area of extinct volcanoes. So there's different basalt in different stages. Some of it's disintegrated, some of it's still solid rock. Elevation here is quite high. You've got this basalt soil paired with a really unusual white grape. The white grape is called Garganega. Garganega is really elaborated only in this area of the Veneto. It's not replicated anywhere else in Italy. This area was actually identified by the Romans and had wine growing since Roman times, as they identified the fact that they really loved this mineral quality in the wine. The Garganega is deceptively full-bodied and rich. It is actually one of the latest ripening white grapes in existence. So it has quite thick skins that go very, very yellow when they're ripe. However, all that wonderful, expressive Garganega fruit is reined in by that mineral character of the volcanic origins of the soil. So it's got this very remarkable character to me, that is almost deceptively full-bodied wine that's showing a sort of different character because of that mineral character. It's all organic. The INAMA family farm also in the Colli Berici. They have about 134 acres. They've also been one of the pioneers in bottling single cru Soaves as well. So they own extensive land in the Carbonare and Foscarino vineyard areas that they make single vineyards wines with as well. Most of actually this Vin Soave does come from the Foscarino cru. And again, we have an older vine component, about 30-year-old vines. It's a very, very short skin contact. Garganega gets a bit too forceful if you do too much skin contact. And again, it's all stainless steel tanks with a malolactic, just like the Pinot Grigio. There's no oak. What I adore as well about Italian wine culture is oak, I think, is an exceptionally overrated commodity. And we're looking at wines that really want to express the wonderful purity and distinguished finesse of the fruit only, without any oak overlay. There is absolutely no need for oak aging Italian wine for me, because if you're dealing with indigenous grapes, then they have enough interest and poise on their own without having to add other vanilla-y, oaky qualities to the wine. So I think that's a really wonderful identifying factor. Also, it also is a matter of cost. These are enjoyable everyday treats and everyday luxuries. Oak barrels are expensive, and that's what makes a bit more of a less of a wine rather you can drink on an everyday basis. So what we have as the food accompaniment to the INAMA Soave is, I could have chosen actually the cheese of Vicenza is not the Piave. Piave is from the north. The Asiago is actually the cheese from this area. And the only trouble with Asiago is that it comes in so many different forms and different kinds. It's even made in foreign countries now, but you can't really find authentic Asiago as much. So hopefully you did pick up the Piave, which is from the north of the Veneto. I think it's a wonderfully underrated cheese that does a good service as a substitute for Parmigiano Reggiano as well. It's a hard cooked curd cheese. I don't know if you managed to get it. It comes in 5 different ages. I suggested the Vecchio, which is a year old or so. Belluno, the area it comes from, just abuts the Dolomite Mountains, and is known for the quality of the cow milk in that area. And it's named after the Piave River, where most of the zone of production is located. So it's nice to have. There's obviously other Venetian food products. It's mostly polenta and rice grown there. A lot of beans. They love their bacala as well. But as a cheese, this really is the cheese. More so, I think, than I always encounter more different Piave than Asiago in the area. That's a great question. It's because there's an element of their commercial availability. We could go a lot more exotic, but these are things that we could rely on finding. I don't know if you partnered with Tamuras or found resources for them. But also in the world of Italian wine, as I mentioned before, 70% of all Italian wine imported is Pinot Grigio. And then on the other factories, in the 70s, when the early importation and success of Italian wine was really started, the three wines that were imported were not even Pinot Grigio. It was Soave. Soave was huge. Bolla Soave is one of sort of the greatest success stories of Italian wine. In the Veneto, 40% of all wine produced is Soave. It sort of slipped out of fashion, but there's a vast difference between the smaller producer type of Soave and then the giant in production. It's a whole different world. So showing you as well something that's not as commercial and it's more smaller production, I think is a valuable thing as well as for an indigenous grape varietal like Garganega. Well, Pinot Grigio we could describe as that as well, as an indigenous variety for sure, although its DNA really derives from Pinot Noir, but it's found its feet and an unreplicable style in Italy, the popular style. The popular style seems to be very neutral for Pinot Grigio. I think this one has an immense amount of character. A tremendous amount of character. And that's, differentiate from the commercial style. It seems to be the anti-Chardonnay. People want something that's not buttery and rich, but more linear and fresh and frisky. That you could surmise on a lot. I think it's really a nod to, helping out your domestic wine producers, and that's what people are familiar with. Stylistically, I think people think bourbon. People are bourbon drinkers, so people like a heavy overlay of oak. Might be a factor. But it's really got to do with the cost of production. A lot of it, because a lot of Soave has extended beyond its traditional boundaries. The wine we're dealing with here is Soave Classico, which is the most ancient, the oldest zone of production for Soave. Soave is extended way beyond its Classico boundaries into the flatter lands where a lot of mechanization occurs. The differentiation here is everything is planted differently. There's still a lot of pergola trained vines. And that means that they all have to be hand-picked. There's a lot of old vine material here. It's not young vine material. So there's a lot more detail and concentration in working the material in this area. And as Classico, you have a different set of standards and ideals as far as production goes, and a different coterie of producers who, are just very, very far removed from industrial wine production. So I don't know, the people apart from INAMA, obviously my affection is with INAMA, but there's people like Suavia, Pra, an array of other, Pirapan, excuse me, let's never forget Pirapan, very famous producer, who are in this level, this tier of people farming in the way that that INAMA does. And it's man hours. It costs a lot more to produce. You're talking, maybe 100 to 200 man hours per hectare to farm the industrial flatlands, whereas here it's about 600 to 800 man hours to farm a hectare. That's a per year cost. So these are a lot more expensive wines, and the food matches and the versatility of this wine, I think, is also something that's very underappreciated too. It's wine's about discovering. It's discovering things that that could have capabilities in ways that you didn't think were possible. So how did the Piave go? Was the Piave interesting because of the saltiness, the glutamates in the Piave? Don't be scared of glutamates. Glutamates were strong in the prosciutto di San Daniele, and there's also a lot of glutamates in hard cheeses, Parmigiano Reggiano, Piave. These hard cheeses have lots of glutamates in them. Otherwise, I think of Hawaiian foods as well. Think of all the glutamates and other interesting aspects with soy and other glutamate-rich foods that these wines could go with. I find Italian wines, merely because of glutamate-rich foods that are eaten, anything with that kind of glutamate presence are brilliant combinations. So SELVAPIANA is, for me, really exhibits all the attributes that I've been describing about a family-owned winery probably in the most extreme fashion, because we are dealing here with a really amazingly historical winery entity. And in fact, the whole story is really told on its origins. The picture on the label, it really tells the whole story here, if I can get the picture going. The picture on the label exhibits essentially that is the winery building, but it's the origins of the building that I find really fascinating. The tower itself used to be a watchtower. It was a watchtower. I don't know. There's so much internecine conflict between different Italian families at this time. We're all familiar with the Ghibelline and the Guelfi families, which is the battle between Florence and Siena. But at this time, there were families fighting over different valleys and different land. So this 11th century watchtower, around it was built actually a very amazing villa. And this villa was built by one of the bishops of Florence. I think it was in the 12th century. So this was adorned, this villa. But underneath the watchtower is still the original cellar of the winery. Why the bishops of Florence decided to locate here is because this was the landed gentry, and of which the church was part of, that same class. They wanted to get away from what was sort of the fetid and unhygienic and beggars and all the other medieval problems of Florence at the time. So they went to the bucolic area of Rufina, which was known to give health-giving properties because of its elevation. Its elevation is key. It's Apennine-influenced winds, even some alpine influence. It's the highest elevation in Chianti. It's also the smallest commune. In fact, they call it Chianti in Montagna, which means mountain Chianti, because it has a totally different aspect to all other parts of Chianti. It's in the orbit of Florence. It's not in the orbit of Siena. And this historical estate has, again, it's all Massal selection. It's very old vine Sangiovese. It has a higher acid. It has, I think, more delicacy and finesse for Sangiovese. It's less broad than Chianti Classico. And this is all organic. It's all fermented again in stainless steel, with indigenous yeasts. It doesn't use industrial yeasts. And then it's aged for 10 months in the very big, large French oak casks, which are at least 1,500 liters in size. So this is just the crispness and the precision of the fruit. Here is just a very unique rendition of Rufina. In fact, they wish they wouldn't even have the word Chianti involved, because they think they're actually a world apart from the Chianti zone itself. This is one of my favorite wines in the portfolio from Tuscany. I can't say the entire portfolio because that would be prejudicial to everybody else. But from Tuscany, I adore this estate. It's a wonderfully historic estate, and that I think, let's say, that redolent story that's really depicted on the label says it all as far as their historical nature. The food accompaniment isn't maybe as exciting because I don't know if we managed to isolate an actual salumi Toscana of any kind, but Tuscan, which always salami always has fennel, finocchio. So that is always an essential part. So fennel is everywhere in this area of Rufina. And it's actually a memory whenever we go to lunch or have an event there, there's always these giant bowls of freshly cut fennel drizzled in the olive oil of the estate. They're also a very, very famous olive oil producer. So the fennel salami is obviously a very famous Tuscan salami. You'll see it everywhere. Garlic and fennel, everyone has their different regional spin on salami, but that's the Tuscan style. And strong fennel seed, strong fennel flavor, I think is a nice little accompaniment to the wine. So the intriguing with the cellar age, it's actually one of the only estates as well, not just in Rufina, but in Chianti, that has vintages going back pre-war. So we actually are commercially involved with some of these ancient vintages. And because of the elevation, because of the acid in the wine, these are some of the longest lasting wines, I think, in all of Tuscany. They're just still express themselves after 40, 50, 60 years. It is a truly unique estate. And this is they also make other wines. They make a Reserva Chianti made with old vines. That is also exceptional. But so this is an area that definitely needs more appreciation. It's the zone of production. It's really just all about nomenclature, naming, geographical area. As far as stylistically, hopefully I sort of elaborate on the fact Chianti is normally a bit broader. This shows a bit more precision and a bit more, it's a higher acidity because of the elevation. They call it Chianti in Montagna because of we're in a mountain area. So I think it has a bit more of a feral, wilder side to the fruit and a higher acid. I think Chianti itself can be a lot more polished and a lot broader and doesn't really exhibit as much acid, and also shows a slightly different mineral tone from the Galestro soils it's grown in, actually in Chianti Classico, the Chianti area itself. We're not really in Chianti because Chianti is in the orbit of, I think I have a map, we're in the orbit of Florence. Chianti is really in the south. So this green area here, we're in the purple area. Chianti is way to the south. Sorry, that's Rufina, and Chianti is south area.
Okay.
So it's different climate, it's different geology. Again, it's different exposures, elevations that make up the unique qualities of these cultural attributes of Italian wine.
Did you have a question?
The Livelli. So Livelli, this is something completely different. This is going to be a completely different style because we're right in the south of Italy. We're in Puglia now. We're on the Salento Peninsula. Puglia is a lot flatter. We don't have the elevation that we've had in some of the other, in fact, all of the other wines. Puglia is really could be called the breadbasket of all of Italy. It's where most of the high quality agricultural produce comes from. And by that, I mean olive oil, tomatoes, and particularly cruciferous vegetables like broccoli. It is an exceptional farming area because you have this maritime influence that is can't really be replicated at all. We're between Lecce and Brindisi here, right on the north coast of the peninsula. This is an area very famous for its ancient olive trees. Livelli as an estate was taken over by, well, it really has an amazing history in and above itself. Because it was actually formed as really designed to be a model agricultural estate at the turn of the century. And that's sorry, the name of the. So it was Marchese Antonio di Viti di Marco, who was an economist who held posts in the Italian government. His ethos was to create an agricultural state that was really a model for the entire South. His idea was to plant, well, not just grapes, but really everything. It was all elements of agriculture he wanted to study and show that this part of southern Italy could create, some of the greatest agricultural products in the entire country. The maritime climate is moderated by the Strait of Otranto and the Gulf of Taranto. So that's between the Adriatic and the Ionian Sea. And it's all mostly Albarello salentino, which is bush vines that are planted to a very, very high density. The vineyards are organized into very closely planted plots and also guarded by olive trees or windbreaks of other trees, because the wind can actually get quite violent here. And it's, this is where you're really seeing that what they call in agriculture a diurnal, the difference between daytime and nighttime temperature is very severe. So you've got wonderfully warm days, but then the winds rev up from the seas at night and it really cools down, which is the ideal aspect actually for growing grapes. So we have another organic estate here, and the owners of the estate now, Marchese Antonio di Viti di Marco, disappeared into the annals of history. Current owners are the Falvo family, who used to own a very famous Tuscan estate called Avignonese. And so there actually now is their modern day quest is to, again, create a model estate of wine that can be held up against anything, not just from Puglia, but for all of southern Italy. The Orion is the wine we're tasting, which is 100% Primitivo. Primitivo, as we're all aware, is really the same DNA, the same genetics as Zinfandel, and originated from Croatia. So Croatia is a bit of a hop away, and we're finding, in fact, they're finding that the origin of all the grapes in Puglia are actually from ancient Greek. So when the Greeks formed the city-state of Tarentum or Taranto, they were brought their own cuttings and their own agricultural resources with them. And this estate, Livelli, has also created another line of wines they call Ascos that pays homage to these the ancient origins of these indigenous grapes that now form part of the world of Pulian grape varieties. This could be one of them. People have researched the DNA, and this is probably a very ancient DNA as well from Primitivo. Again, we got stainless steel fermentation. It's aged for a small amount of time in barriques. It's really, I think, a very fresh, vigorous, but very deep rendition of Primitivo. It really displays a lot of volume and body and richness for a wine at this price point. It's, I think, probably their most popular wine from the estate at the moment, although the real signature grape of the area of this part of the Salento Peninsula is Negro Amaro, not really Primitivo. Negro Amaro is a lot better known, and their plantings also of Susumaniello and Verdeca are really leading the way for people getting more familiar with those two grapes as well. If you see those, I think those are available. Those are well worth exploring as well. I think they're just an exceptional Pulian grapes with this Greek heritage that I just described. And then, I don't know if we managed to get Burrata. Burrata itself doesn't really make its way to the islands, I don't believe, because it has a shelf life of maybe 2 or 3 days. So we got maybe buffalo mozzarella, burrata, some kind of mozzarella to go with this. if you've ever had one of the food revelations in the world is to have fresh burrata in Puglia. Puglia is all about burrata, and if you have it when it's cut open and the stracciatella comes out, the cream bursts out, and that little sack of mozzarella that creates the burrata is so soft and it's not got that hard character yet. It's one of the greatest food experiences in the world, I think. I would make a pilgrimage now even to Puglia just for that. It is wonderful. There's nothing like it. And it's funny, it's one of those cheeses that cannot be shipped and imported and is the same thing. So I don't know what you got your hands on there, but it's hopefully something vaguely resembling burrata. And this is, again, the rich jamminess goes with that creaminess. I think that's a lovely wine combination. This Orion Primitivo could even go as I like to drink these wines almost after dinner instead of a port because I find them so rich, rather than as a table wine. It goes great with barbecue and other, richer, fattier meats. But even, as I say, after dinner with a cheese course with a lot of triple cream or burrata style cheeses would be the thing. Long and cruel, but to me this is the area of polenta, especially anything with polenta and the braised meats on top of the polenta. Maybe not as right with the Soave. Something that I like a lot, just from a personal perspective, would be a personal choice, is this is also an area where they grow, I think, the greatest rice in Italy. And the Veneto is also the area for the origination of risotto. There's a rice maker called Ferron. If you could ever find Ferron rice in the US, it's to me, the Vialone Nano rice from Ferron is just off the charts. So to me, a seafood risotto, Venice is known for the amazing seafood. That would be probably, I think, the greatest, give a nod to the origins. It's if they grow together, they go together is always my philosophy with that. And also bacalao, salt cod is huge in the Veneto. So bacalao, salt cod, in milk, they tend to cook it. And Soave to me is another really amazing accompaniment too. But I don't know, would I also, the grow together, go together, we got to think as well of your situation as well. Do you think it would, it's, in Friuli, they have their own, there's a lot of barley, a lot of sort of semi-alpine. They have a version of spatzel that they do very well in Friuli. For SELVAPIANA, there's always pasta involved. Braised meat pasta would be a good thing. Like a peachy with a boar, and for the livelli, that you can go in all kinds of directions on that one. I think that's really open for many different interpretations. You cannot be scared of acid if you want to get into Italian wines, because that's what it's talking about, is the elevation and the soils, the geology. These create a really acidic. These are more acid wines than anywhere in Europe. And that's why they say that the wine is the sauce. There aren't any sauciers in the kitchen in Italy. Some guy knocking up something to drape over a piece of meat. That doesn't exist, because the wine is the sauce. And acid is obviously the thing you need for food to make it interesting and clear the palate for the next experience. So that's, I was trying, if people, I think, get a bit spooked sometimes who are new to Italian wine, because the level of acid is definitely there and present. And thank you, Chiara. Well, Italy has so much to be proud of, because it's actually the last bastion, I think, almost in the world, where you have a biodiverse environment for making wine. And what I mean by that, there's not a monoculture that we're familiar with, which is just miles and miles of vineyards that you see. The vine is always part of a biodiverse agricultural environment that includes animals, includes citrus trees, olive trees, other agricultural products, or forest, arable land, all encapsulated in a large, biodiverse, bio-interactive way. And that is why Italy has more organic wines. That is why they still have and are producing over 400 different varietals, because these are little enclaves that have made this survive. In the industrial technological advances have only really, I think, come to the Veneto. Everywhere else is still existing in a quite a bucolic and wonderful biodiverse way. And that to me is a lot of the fascination with Italian wine as well, because these aren't just wines, as I said before, these are cultural artifacts and very important ones too.
I want to say thank you so much, because I am so impressed with your knowledge, your expertise, just bridging between food science and culture. So I'm really impressed. Just I learned so much, and it was a wonderful presentation.